What's up, everybody? It's FYGP, and today I have a video about two books, actually. One of them is Brave New World by Aldous Huxley, and the other one would be 1984 by George Orwell. Of course, these books have been covered extensively also by other people, and are some of the most famous pieces of literature. I think a lot of people also have them as mandatory texts in high school, but they don't really teach you the deeper meaning behind some of those texts in high school. So what we are going to do right here is going to take a look at Brave New World by Aldous Huxley. And although it is a fiction book, it provides us with a lot of insights about how these elites would like to see the world structured. So, for example, there is no Christianity anymore. There is no religions anymore. There's only one big religion. It's in the book. It's like a parody. It's based on Fords and the Model T. Instead of crosses, they have big T's everywhere, for example. And this is just a sort of a foreshadowing of what a technocratic sort of global elite government would like the world religions to be like. They would like them to be consumerists, materialists, and based around, do you got a Bugatti? Do you got a Bugatti? Those kinds of things. So, what color is your Bugatti? So, yeah. I think that is what Huxley was getting, wanted to say there. The book presents a dystopian vision of the future, set in a world where genetic engineering, hypnopedia, sleep teaching, and mind-altering drugs, such as the drug Soma have created highly satisfied and controlled society. The novel's central character is Bernard Marx, of course. All of the people in the book are named after some sort of revolutionary or industrialist. There's I think even there's Lenina, right? A girl named after his partner, his girlfriend of Marx. Crown, so Lenina Crown, like Lenin, right? So Marx and Lenin, right? The novel explores themes of individuality, freedom, and dangers of society that is controlled by a small group of elites, where human reproduction is placed in the hands of the state, which is the central theme. Human reproduction is placed in the hands of the state. There's several castes, like the Alpha Plus, and then you go all the way down to the Gammas, and those are like the lowest class of society, so very much like an Indian caste system. This future society is, and of course the genetic engineering is designed that way that you can produce an exact number of people for each class. Of course, that is, I think, a no-brainer right there. What is implied there, of course. And people can be produced in labs. Genetic makeup can be modified, and the world government produces as many humans of each caste as necessary. The synthetic humans are conditioned from birth to accept their place in society and caste and reject freedom, passion, or anger, rebellion, or dissent. Anything of that is not tolerated in this Brave New World. So this includes the use of Soma. Of course, Soma is going to keep you happy while you are basically enslaved. So sex is everywhere around people and seen simply as a tool of pleasure, but not of reproduction. And love, I don't think, even exists in the novel, to be honest. It's all just a tool of pleasure. It's just a sport. Sex is everywhere around people and simply seen as a tool of pleasure, of course. That's also like in modern day society. Like all of the music videos, all of the movies, all of that, stuff is heavily sexualized, but then again, there's nobody who actually thinks of sex as like a little people, and the newer generations think of sex as actually as reproductive, of its reproductive function, which is actually the purpose of it, right? So relationships get devalued. Basically, everything, or marriages or whatever, get devalued. Everything is centered around destroying the family. That is essentially what the New World Order is about. It's about the destruction of the family. and even better when you have the people conditioned to not even start families. That's even better for the New World Order. So that's perfectly expressed in the book by Aldous Huxley, I would say. So in fact, the very idea of giving birth is considered obscene in the future, which is the central theme of the book. Of course, the global government that controls the world and produces genetically modified humans into each caste as many as they want, and there is no sex as a tool of reproduction, but just as a tool of pleasure. Which there's nothing wrong with having pleasure in sex. I think that sex is amazing, and like I have pleasure in sex. Like people should have pleasure in sex, but like just to see it basically as just an animalistic act of fulfilling your whatever your needs, or like your basic animalistic desires, I think is a bit wrong, because I think humans have I think we should be at a higher consciousness level where it shouldn't be just that kind of stuff when it comes to sex. So yeah, and in the book there's a woman who gives birth to a child naturally. She is shunned by society and ultimately dies of shame and isolation. The disdain for natural birth in society is seen as like it is technocratic and technological and scientifically advanced society. There won't be any reproduction necessary, is what the world controllers are convinced by. The rejection of natural births and the emphasis on lab-grown individuals in brave new world serves as a revelation of the long-term plans of a small group of Malthusian elites. Malthusianism goes back to Thomas Malthus, who was a British writer, population sort of scientists, whatever you would call it. He basically said that wouldn't be enough resources to uphold the population growth rates back in the day, in the late 18th century. So he said that what would be the natural implication of that is that the birth rates need to be lowered, and that with that way also the population will be lowered. And of course, this exemplified were also in the talks, of course, of Aldous Huxley, who was actually a member of a very well-educated family from the British higher class. And in his speech, he discussed the ways which technology and propaganda could be used to control and manipulate society. He argued that a new kind of totalitarianism could emerge in the future, one that was based on the use of drugs and psychological conditioning rather than physical force. Essentially, what is described in the fiction novel is he warns, is actually a real scenario in the real world. He was talking about that in the lectures at Berkeley, so in 1962. But Aldous Huxley wasn't really a staunch critic of that system, because his family was heavily involved in, for example, the formation of the UN and UNESCO. His brother, Julian Huxley, was in fact the one who wrote the philosophy of UNESCO and is responsible for managing society and keeping everyone orderly and happy, right? That's also the purpose of the global elites. Of course, they want that. But they also want chaos sometimes, because crisis can be manufactured to achieve certain goals in order to alter society. So that's why you had COVID. That's why you had the Ukraine war. That's why you had, the Syria. Like all of that stuff is just, or terrorism for 20 years, as a T word. Of course, you cannot say that word on YouTube. You will get censored, shadow banned. Also, of course, also according to General Konstantin Petrov, we covered him on this channel plenty of times, the ideal system for the global elite is essentially the Indian caste system. And of course, we go to Yuval Noah Harari, who is actually the second in the World Economic Forum, one of the chief writers of the World Economic Forum, promoted by them and everything. So we go to him and his book Homo Deus, where he actually argues for upgrading people who can afford it with transhumanism, gene manipulation, and to create a Homo Deus. These Homo Deus would be the ruling elite because they would have the means to almost create a breakaway race of superhumans, while everyone can't afford to upgrade, will be left behind, and would become useless. One of the central characters in the novel Brave New World is Mustafa Mont. Of course, he is the resident controller of Western Europe, a world controller, part of the global elite, which the Huxley family was acquainted with. Right, we talked about that. He's a symbol of the ruling elite, elite power and authority, and represents the novel's themes of conformity, technocracy, authoritarianism, control, and power. His character represents the idea that individuals who possess knowledge and power are responsible for the controlling and manipulating society to maintain the status quo. Mustafa Mond is an enigmatic character who embodies the conflict between scientific progress, which allowed for such a world in the first place, and humanity. On the other hand, he's a product of the scientific method that governs society, and he is deeply committed to maintaining the status quo. On the other hand, he is a man of culture and learning who is aware of the value of individualism, but of course he doesn't let people be individualistic because that would be against their vision of a perfectly managed society. The world is stable now, people are happy. That's when he talks with John the Savage, who is actually one of the main characters as well in the book. Of course, the world is stable now, people are happy, they get what they want, they never want what they get. They're well off, they're safe, they're never ill, they're not afraid to death, they're blissfully ignorant of passion and old age. They're plagued with no mothers or fathers. Yeah. Yeah, that's what they want. They want to destroy the family, of course. They have got no wives or children or lovers to feel strongly about. Yeah, as you can see, it's all about destroying that. That's why I had to describe it. So they've got, and they're also conditioned that they're practically can't help behaving as they ought to behave. And if anything should go wrong, there's Soma, which is the mind-altering drug, which keeps everybody happy. This illustrates what he thinks, of course, as a world socialist controller. Yeah, the world is dominated by technology, consumerism, and hedonism. But also, of course, there's no lovers to feel strongly about. There's also no children, nor wives, and there's no mothers or fathers. Of course, that's the goal of the Malthusian New World Order Great Reset elite that controls the world. So basically, the modern world, where social media and other forms of digital communication often promote conformity and discourage an independent thought. Independent thoughts are often removed by the algorithm. Of course, that's what we see also here. In one scene at the end of the book, World Controller Mond is even shown removing certain studies while making others available to the public. There, Huxley points to the selective publishing of science and knowledge and the fact that the power elites presides over more information that essentially allows them to control narratives and shape public opinions and just control society as a whole. Although it is a fictional book, it shows us what Malthusian and Fabian socialists think the ideal vision of controlling society is. A society where everyone is happy because they're heavily medicated, propagandized, and man-controlled, while everything is controlled by a small group of elites. Despite it being fiction, Brave New World was precise in anticipating many of the social and technological developments of the 20th and 21st century, and for his critique of the dangers of a society that values conformity above everything else. So that's just some stuff I wrote about those books myself. There's many other books that we will cover. This is only getting into it first using the fiction works, but we will cover, of course, in the next video, 1984 by George Orwell, which is another fiction book. We will cover NATO's secret armies. We will cover the philosophy of UNESCO. We will cover a brief history of the future. We will cover The Power Elite by C. Wright Mills. We will cover Bertrand Russell's Impact on Science and Society. We'll cover The Republic by Plato. We will cover Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution by Anthony Sutton. We will cover Wall Street and the Rise of Hitler. We will cover Wall Street and FDR. We will cover Noam Chomsky, manufacturing.